Today I'm going to show you how I drew this coral in colored pencil and tell you how you can get these amazing coral reference photos to use for your own artwork. Before we get started, just a quick little story time about how I ended up using this reference photo and why I've got a lot of amazing coral reference photos now. If you're not interested in this section, you can just skip ahead here to the artwork section. I had the opportunity to meet Than of Tidal Gardens at Aquarella recently. He has a YouTube channel here. Well, on YouTube, that's not redundant at all, is it? But he has a YouTube channel where he educates people and teaches them about corals and, of course, sells them as well. And he has the best videography and photography of anyone I've ever seen when it comes to coral or fish. He's just incredible. So I got to talking to him at Aquarella and had mentioned how much I would love to use his photograph for reference for my own artwork. And the more we talked, we realized this could be a great opportunity for other artists as well. So he opened up his Patreon to offer, it's something like 50 photos a month for as little as $5 a month. That's the one I signed up for. And you get these great reference photos to use in your own artwork. And as I mentioned, Tidal Gardens also sells coral. One of my best friends, she has the same fish tank setup that I do. She made a purchase from Tidal Gardens and it was packed so well. I just can't get over how, and it's big, this was a really, really nice coral. And it's funny because she buys coral fairly often online. She had the most positive things to say about Tidal Gardens from anywhere she's ordered before. She actually ordered this same metallic green torch. She ordered from another seller online and it definitely wasn't metallic green. And they tried to convince her, well, it'll change under different lighting. No, it was not a metallic green. It was brown. It was a brown coral. They sent her the wrong one. They actually did refund her, but her experience with Tidal Gardens was nothing but positive. Anyway, onto the artwork. Point of this story is if you want great reference photos, I will have a link to Tidal Gardens' Patreon page below in the video description. If you are supporters on my Patreon channel, make sure to head over where I've got the 2.5-hour version of this tutorial available for you now. If you are unfamiliar with Patreon, for as little as $4 a month, you get access to all of my weekly 1 to 2, sometimes 3-hour-long tutorials and a few other things, some reference photos and stuff like that. And if you're not sure if Patreon is something that interests you, head over to my Patreon library. I will have a link to that in the video description as well. I have a free 2-hour-long marquee and colored pencil demonstration so you can get a taste of what Patreon is like and see if you think that's going to be a fit for you. Now, let's move on to this demonstration. I am working on Fabriano Artistico Extra White Hot Press 140-pound watercolor paper. I've started by using masking tape to tape my artwork to my board. That's just going to keep it from sliding around as I work. And I'm going to layer in my base colors first. I started with black, but quickly realized I should probably get a base of the lighter blue color that I wanted in there before I jump straight to the black. I can always come back through and darken that up later. Now these are largely what I'm using here are the Derwent Lightfast colors for that base background. These blend so nicely, very, very smooth. It took me, I would say, 3 layers of colored pencil on the paper before I started blending out with odorless mineral spirits. I use Mona Lisa odorless mineral spirits. Gamsol works exactly the same. It's supposed to be less toxic. And I'll have links to the supplies that I'm using in the video description. So you can see I'm layering now some black right over that blue. I'm using a tagline bristled filbert brush to blend out my odorless mineral spirits. Now, your first few layers as you blend out with the OMS, it's going to look a bit dull. It's going to take me several layers before I can get this to really be as bold as what I want that end result to be. So when you blend for the first time, don't think, oh my gosh, it's not what I wanted it to be. It's okay. As long as you didn't push too hard with your pencil to start with, you won't run into problems where you can't put additional layers. You can just keep layering on top of layer until you get the results that you're looking for. But if you push too hard with that pencil, you'll flatten the tooth of the paper, and that's going to prevent you from doing many additional layers. Now, this section was part of the live stream. I will have a card pop-up, so you can check that out if you want to watch that in real time. That's why my hand's floating around all over the place. It's impossible for me to talk on the live streams without my hands waving around all over like a crazy person. Switch to a slightly smaller brush in there to blend that out. Now, the brush that I'm using, it's a low Cornell Taklon bristled filbert, and I cannot find that specific brush online. So I've started playing around with some other alternatives, and right now I'm really liking these Simply Simmons brushes for blending out with the odorless mineral spirits. But any Taklon bristled filbert should work just fine for you. A huge tip for you when you are blending with the odorless mineral spirits, when you get your first layer where you're blending out the first time, you can use a lot more OMS on that brush. When you get to further layers, each additional time you blend out with odorless mineral spirits, so you've added pencil to the paper, you let that dry completely. Always let it dry, otherwise you can damage the tooth of your paper when you go on top of wow, that didn't come out right. When you go on top of it with your colored pencils. But then when you go and blend it again, so you've let it dry, put another layer or 2 or 4 or 5 of colored pencil, and you go to blend again with the odorless mineral spirits, each additional time you repeat that process, you're going to use less and less of the odorless mineral spirits on your brush, because it will get to the point where you start lifting the pigment off the paper instead of blending it in. So just be aware of that. Usually when I get to my final times through of blending with OMS, I will start to let that dry a bit on the brush. So if I dip it into the paint thinner, and I'm interchanging the term paint thinner, OMS, and odorless mineral spirits, it's all the same thing there. But as I do additional layers with that, I'm going to dry it a little bit onto either a Viva paper towel, and if you're using OMS, you want to use a Viva paper towel. Regular paper towels are not going to do much for you, or an old t-shirt or something like that will work fine too. But just remember, less and less with each additional layers, each additional time that you blend it out with that odorless mineral spirits will give you better results. Just remember, don't push too hard on that paper too early on. Now, I will use that technique towards the end when I'm on my final layers, where I'm not going to want additional layers. We call that burnishing, where you push hard with your pencil and it really jams that pigment into the paper. And that can give you great results. But if you do it too soon, you're preventing or limiting how many colors or how many layers you can put on top of that later on. So that's why I don't push very hard with my pencil until the very, very end. And some people will never push hard with a pencil, not even at the end, but just avoid pushing too hard too early on. Now with colored pencils, some of the really bright fluorescent, especially when you get with pinks, you don't have a lot of light fast options there. I'm using the Derwent Light Fast. I've got the Caran d'Ache, which are light fast, and then of course my Polychromos. But it's hard to find some really, really bright pinks that you might want, especially when dealing with corals or certain flowers that are super bold. So what I do instead is work on my values, or focus on my values. Make sure I've got that super high contrast. I can make up for not having fluorescent, or as fluorescent as you might want, or what your reference photo calls for, by really hyping up that contrast. Make sure your darks are dark enough and your lights are light enough, and that way you still get that nice boldness that you might otherwise be looking for in a fluorescent type pencil that, again, is not going to be light fast. Now, there are fluorescent colored pencils out there. I think Prismacolor has some. I've seen some with some other brands. The problem is those colors, those pigments just are not light fast, and so that's just something to be aware of. But you can kind of make up for that when you're working on something like this that's this bright by just adjusting, keeping your darks dark enough and your lights light enough. You will still get that boldness. Another thing that I like to do to make my colors really bold is to put my oranges right next to, or on top of, in some cases, my magenta colors. I will use those two colors side by side all the time, and you get this beautiful glow from it. Those two look wonderful next to each other and layered on top of each other. Now at this point, you can see this coral is really muddy, really dull. Now, look how bright I'm going to need the light colors to be for the highlights on this guy. If you are not using the Touch Up Texture titanium white mixture that I'm going to be using here, you're going to want to leave the white of your paper showing through. A white colored pencil is never going to be this bright white. So do be aware of that. You may have to just be very careful as you're working and let that paper show through. But because I have this product, and I'll have a link to that again, or as well as the other materials in the video description, but because I'm using this, it allows me a bit more freedom to just blend, make my colors super dark, and then I can come on top with this and get those really bright whites on top. I'm using a synthetic hog-haired liner brush to paint this on, and I do have a video showing you exactly how to use this product, how to mix it. I will have a card pop up so you can check that out, and then I'll put a link in the video description as well. That is the brush and pencil touch-up texture and titanium white. And I'm mixing those two products together to make this, it's almost like a paint. Now I'll have people often ask, why can't I just use acrylic paint or a white gel pen? The problem is you're no longer going to have an archival end result there. You're putting a water-based product on top of wax and oil-based pencils, which all of the pencils I'm using here are. So that's going to be a problem over time. It may look great now, but over time that can start to chip or flake away. You're not supposed to put water-based products on top of wax or oil. You can do the reverse, but it's the concept we've all heard, wax, that's not the right word, oil and water don't mix. So just to be aware of that, if you want to use a white on top, like I've done here, the only product that is made for colored pencil is the one that I'm using in this demonstration. And I've seen plenty of people use acrylic paints or gel pens, and it looks great, but you have to remember that's not going to be archival long term. That's an issue. And what I mean by archival is it's not going to last as long. Those products aren't meant to be used in that way, whereas this one is. Now I'm starting to hype up my values there, and you can see I'm mixing the orange and the magentas quite a bit. And look how I start to get this beautiful glow with those colors right next to each other. The other great thing with using the touch-up texture titanium white mixture, if you have a hard time, let's say like what I had before, my base layer was fairly muddy. If I wanted that green, that bright green to be as bright as what I've got here, I have to get white down first, and then I can put the green pencil on top of it once it dries, and look how it stands out. If I would have used that green pencil just on top of that muddy orange color that I had previously, it wouldn't have really shown up. I would have still had a fairly muddy color, but by putting the white first, that allows me to get this really bold color on top that stands out beautifully. And then once that dries, I can come back through again with my touch-up texture and titanium white. The touch-up texture also, say that 10 times fast, my gosh, but the touch-up texture also adds tooth back to the paper. So it makes it so that you can get even more layers. Now, the trick with that, make sure if you're going to put your pencil on top of the touch-up texture and titanium white mixture, let it dry completely. I'd say at least 15 minutes or so. I usually go even longer than that. Dry to the touch isn't quite dried enough. It can be dry to the touch, but when you put the pencil over, if you push very hard, it can cause it to flake up a bit. You need to let it really cure before you put the pencil over it to make sure it's sticking all the way. So now I'm going back through again with that touch-up texture and titanium white mixture. This video is starting to sound like an advertisement for that product. It's just amazing. That was a game changer for me with colored pencil. It really opened up or gave me a lot of ability to get different effects that I just was having a hard time achieving without it. I mean, look how little these dots are. There is no way I'm going to leave that many little dots with the white of the paper showing through. It's too small. If I was working larger, sure, but on something this size, there's just no way. It wasn't going to happen. And just keep building up that contrast. Now, one thing, when this video is sped up like this, it gives you the illusion that I'm not letting it dry in between the touch-up texture titanium white or in between using the odorless mineral spirits. I absolutely am. I just cut those parts out of the video. And this one branch took hours. That's another thing that you want to remember with colored pencils. It's very slow, and when videos are sped up like this, it's great because it shows you the layering process, but do keep in mind this creates this idea that the piece is finished in 20 minutes. You know, it's very fast. No, it's not. I spent days and days and days working on this coral. So just take your time, work slowly, enjoy that process. So as I blend this out, you can see how now I'm getting a little bit of that muddiness where my greens are kind of blending in with my oranges and being fairly messy, but that's okay. I will come back on top of that with that touch-up texture titanium white mixture, and then I can brighten up colors on top of that. Your first layers, before you blend it out with odorless mineral spirits, are always going to look a bit like crayon. That's totally okay. That's normal. Don't worry about that. Now, you do want to have a lot of layers on the pencil before you, or on the pencil, a lot of layers on the paper before you blend with the odorless mineral spirits. This is going to give you much, much better results. If you don't have a lot of pigment on the paper, it's just a light layer of color. When you blend with the odorless mineral spirits, it just kind of fades. It doesn't do a whole lot. It looks very muted. Get a lot of pigment on there, many, many layers before you blend out. Now, if you don't have enough pigment and you blend out, it didn't ruin anything. It just isn't going to look very good until you get more layers. You're going to have to repeat that process a whole lot more times. That was terrible grammar. Again, there's that orange and violet right next to each other. Go ahead and work on this next one. Now, with the touch-up texture and titanium white mixture, I will generally try to wait until I've got a fairly large area that's going to need that. When you mix that stuff, it doesn't save. And it dries quickly. I usually will mix it on a little condiment cup lid, and it dries really, really, really quickly. So you just want to mix a small amount, but I don't want to keep mixing it every few minutes when I'm ready for it to use it again. So what I'm doing here, while I did use it on the first branch right away, here, the reason that I'm not jumping into using it at this stage is because I want to get more done so I can kind of do a few of those branches at the same time when going over with that white touch-up texture titanium white mixture. Now there I'm using the Derwent Drawing Chinese White. That's going to be your most opaque white colored pencil. I've not found anything else that was as opaque. It is an extremely, extremely soft lead. So you're not going to sharpen it to a very fine point. You're not going to get a lot of detail with it, but it is really opaque. I would say the next most opaque white pencil, but this one will actually give you a bit more detail, is the Caran d'Ache Luminance White. That one's fairly opaque. Not as opaque as Derwent Drawing, but close. But that one, it's a harder lead, so you're able to sharpen it to a finer point than you are with the Derwent Drawing. But you can see where I had added the dots. You can see it. It's still worth adding highlights with that. It's pretty much just going to lighten up the color that you put over it. It's never really going to be white because those pencils are going to blend in with each other. When you put the white pencil on there, it's blending in with a color that's already there. And while I say it's opaque, none of the pencils are completely opaque. If you want to get even more detail, you can work larger. You can really shade each of the little polyps on the coral if you wanted to. So I let that dry, and now I'm going through with the touch-up texture and titanium white mixture. I'm still having a hard time saying that, but I can go over several branches at the same time now. And look how I get the little details around the polyps. The polyps are the things that look like little flowers. Now I'm really starting to separate these branches, and this will start giving me a lot of depth. Now, your values make such a big difference in getting the depth in your piece. I need to make sure that some areas of the coral are way lighter or way darker than others so that you get some depth on what is closer, what is farther away from the viewer. You don't want to go through and just find the perfect, most beautiful combination of orange and magenta and put that everywhere. It's going to be very, very flat. You really want to watch your reference photo. Where are your light areas and where are your dark areas? Your values matter more than anything. It's very easy to get caught up on being worried about getting the exact right color. You saw this reference photo at the beginning of the video. These are not the same colors. It's close. It's not even that close, but it's semi-close. But it's still a beautiful piece. You don't have to have your colors exact. What you want to focus on, get your values in there. Dark's dark enough, light's light enough. That's what's going to make your work look more realistic, assuming that's your goal, is getting that contrast in there between your lights and your darks. As long as your colors are close, you're fine. It's very easy, especially with colored pencil, because you've got a box. If you get, let's say, a box of the polychromos, there's 120 pencils right there. That is a lot of colors. Well, really, I would say 118 for me, because I always pull the two non-light fast ones from the set, or lesser light fast, I should say. But that's a lot of colors to choose from, and that can be fairly overwhelming. Don't stress yourself out about choosing the right color. That really is not a big deal. Get your values in there. Are your darks dark enough? Your lights light enough? If you can focus on that, the rest, it's all going to come together, and the color's not a huge deal. I also recommend, if you are finding yourself overwhelmed by the amount of colors you have with your colored pencils, choose a limited palette. Pick maybe 12 pencils or under. Very limited colors, and just make yourself finish your painting or drawing, for however you want to call it, from those 12 pencils. Don't feel like you have to use every pencil in the set. And if you're using a more limited color palette, that's going to teach you how to blend colors better. I'm planning a video coming up here very, very soon with colored pencil where I'm only going to use the 12 set of polychromos and well, I'll probably use a white Derwent drawing or luminance pencil in addition to that. But with that limited color palette, I'll show you, you can make just about any color. You don't have to use every pencil in your set or go out and buy a whole set of 120. If you can just get the 12 set now, you can do amazing work just with those limited colors, because of the way that they layer and blend, and you can mix colors from those 12. Again, just really focusing on those values. Where are my darks and where are my lights? And right now there is a super ugly stage, and that's something that's really important to keep in mind when you're working on colored pencil. You are going to have some of the ugliest stages, and because colored pencil is such a slow medium, it'll feel like you're never going to work through them. Keep layering. Don't call it finished just because there's color on it. Look at how bad that looks right now. That's terrible. It's completely saturated with color and it looks completely terrible. It's not wrong. It's not bad. It's not finished. So keep layering and work on those values. Don't stop until you get those in there right. Getting some more of that touch-up texture, titanium white mixture. Look what a difference that makes. Seriously, this product is one of the things with colored pencil for me I cannot live without. I would not want to go back to doing colored pencil work without this. It really does make life so much easier. And you don't have to leave it white. If white is too bright, it's just, wow, that's super white. Let it dry and you can put your pencils on top of it and tone it down. Remember, every time you're adding that, because it has the touch-up texture mixed into it, you're adding tooth to the paper, which means your pencils are going to stick really well to it. And again, going back through, focusing on value. See how I'm taking the blues and the green there and going over the white. So I'm not leaving the white straight white. And the biggest lesson you can learn from this demonstration is to keep layering, to keep working on your project. Don't call it finished too soon. Keep layering and keep focusing on those values. Dark's dark enough, light's light enough. That if you can get that in there, that right, your value's correct, it will make up for so many other mistakes you may have or many problems you may have in the piece. You can see how smooth this comes as I add additional layers. My first couple of layers may look a little bit grainy and gritty. That's okay. Keep layering and smoothing it out so it doesn't look like a crayon piece. I think a lot of people misunderstand and think that colored pencil, when they hear that term, they don't take it seriously. They assume it's going to look like crayon. No, when we blend it and layer it, it should look just like a painting. And that's why so many of us call colored pencil work painting. Well, that, and I actually am using a paintbrush sometimes with the odorless mineral spirits. When you get to the final stages, keep backing up away from your work and look at it from a distance, or turn your work upside down. Sometimes if you look at things upside down, you will notice, turn your reference photo and the artwork, but you will notice so many things you never noticed before, little things that you may want to adjust. Maybe it's your values, maybe it's contrast, maybe it's details. All of that, you will see so much more that you wouldn't, you would think you're looking at it right side up, you'd notice. No, flip it over, you won't believe how much more you notice in your artwork, and that's true of any medium. And there is my finished coral drawing. Sure, you'll see me doing a lot more coral coming up because I've got a whole lot of reference photos now being signed up to Tidal Gardens Patreon. One of the things that I think is so fun too about drawing these macro photos of coral is you're getting this sort of abstract look. If somebody doesn't know that's a coral, it just looks like an abstract, which I think is really fun and not something you see that often with colored pencil. Do any of you guys have that one friend where if one of you buys something, the other has to go out and buy the same thing? For me, that is my friend Stacy. Here she is the day she made her makeup match her chicken. She's gonna kill me for sharing that. Usually the items that we're encouraging each other to go out and buy are plants, makeup, this sort of thing. This was different. I got this tank back in January. I set this one up back in January of 2019. And I'd say within a month or so, she had bought the same tank. She normally kept freshwater. Well, she still has her freshwater, but she keeps freshwater fish. So she wanted to get into saltwater as well. So she bought the same tank. That is just our relationship. One of us gets something, we encourage the other to go out and get it. And we will hound each other until the other person goes and buys that type of plant, whatever it is. We are terrible influences on each other's bank accounts. So when Stacy got her coral from Tidal Gardens, not only was I jealous because I'm a huge fan of Tidal Gardens, but I was jealous that she got a new coral. I hadn't gotten a new coral for my tank in over a month. The jealousy was real. So when I went into my local fish store, Glass Aquatics, which is like Disneyland for me, this is my favorite place, I got some help from Vanessa and Mike. Don't worry, Vanessa has a full face. She just chopped it off in the selfie. But I got some help from them on picking out a couple of new corals for my tank. One of the things that I love so much about this store is when I went in, I told Mike, who's bagging up my coral for me here, that I wanted an acan. And the first thing he asked is, okay, do you know anything about acans? Are you familiar with them? And they will educate you and tell you how to best care for them. So I just love that they take the time to really help you keep the animals as healthy as possible. And then Mike went over different coral foods, some that I wasn't currently using, explained how to feed them. And I mean, you just get really, really good customer service here. So it's tons of fun. Just want to give them a bit of a shout out there. But yeah, this purchase, completely Stacy's fault because she made me all jealous about her new Tidal Gardens corals. So here is Acan Andy. This was one of the two corals I brought home. He's doing great. He's already eating great. A lot of fun to feed. He definitely likes food. So, and a little crab that's in the way of my shot there. Mike also sent me home with this amazing mushroom. The red one in the center, he's got blue spots. It looks way better in person. The lighting on this video is not amazing, but it just really added a lot to my mushroom garden there. For those of you who are unfamiliar with corals, or those who are familiar and thinking I'm an idiot, I know the blasto off to the right or the left. I don't even know my rights and my left. The coral off to the left with the green center, that is a blasto. He's not a mushroom, but the rest in this shot are all that's my little mushroom garden, which are doing really well. They all look so pretty. Those two corals added so much to the tank. So, yep. Stacy's fault, had to buy coral because she got coral. So there is the current state of my tank. If you have not already, make sure to hit the subscribe button. You may also want to hit that bell notification icon because YouTube doesn't notify people very often when new videos go up. I've also got an email newsletter you can subscribe to. That's free. I give you art tips and keep you up to date with whatever videos went up. So that will also help kind of counter YouTube not notifying people anymore.